One of the interesting things that I enjoy most about covering anime the way that I do is every now and then having these moments where you start analyzing exactly how you view the writer is trying to tell their story. And while with many anime titles, I'll get into crazy theories and thought process as to what I think the writer's doing, and it might end up turning into something that's just not as fantastical, but it is always an interesting thing. And this leads us to the world's finest assassin gets reincarnated into another world as an aristocrat. This is a series that, while at face value, most people will see, it's another isekai, another power fantasy type story. From my perspective, one thing that has been stuck in my mind ever since the series began was getting into the demon in shining armor aspect. So if you're interested in this topic, stay tuned. Keep in mind, I will be doing spoilers for the first 6 episodes of the series. These aren't really heavy spoilers in my opinion, but do keep that in mind. So with that said, let's jump into it. So what is the concept of the demon in shining armor, from at least what I'm making it up to be? This is the idea of a protagonist character, or a character in general, that at face value seems like they're doing good, but underneath, either based on story elements or just pure speculation, the character themselves is actually a demon. There's obviously 2 aspects of the story that gives us the perception that he is a demon. The first one is from the perspective of the first episode. It opens up with this character who is an assassin. He's lived a very long life. He's done nothing but assassinate targets for this organization, and he's instilling into his pupil very heavily not to trust others, because trusting others will get you killed. So again, it's heavily implying that his whole viewpoint is never trust anybody. And the only people that he actually trusts, despite him saying that, he trusts the organization. And what does the organization do at the very end of his life? They betray him. They kill him. So this is a man that has trust for nobody, feels that you will die if you get trust, and then he ends up dying because he trusted. So this is somebody you can't really trust because he can't trust you. Jumping forward, and to give a little context for those that have not watched the series, this assassin, after dying, is reincarnated into another world where he is supposed to kill the hero. And while he's growing up and building up his strength to fight this hero in the future, he has to gain allies. And the way that he does that is he looks for people that has mana capability who will work for him. One such person is Tart. And Tart is fleeing from another region into the region that he is in, and he discovers her. Now, obviously, he's choosing to bring her under his wing, and the way that he does that is through what he calls brainwashing. Yes, I have criticized that episode for exactly what he does to brainwash Tart, but essentially what he's doing is gaining her trust, giving her the option to not work for him, but ultimately he knows that she will accept it because she's from a very poor and starving situation. He shows her strength by killing the wolves that are attacking her. He feeds her, explains what she'll be doing for him, and that he is an assassin, that he will kill people, and then ultimately again giving her the option if she wants to join him or not. And again, this is, from his perspective, is him brainwashing her, but still, keep that in mind. Brainwashing. He's not saying that he's persuading her. He's not saying that he's offering her goods for her to work with him. He's specifically saying that he wants to brainwash her. And again, these are 2 specific things we want to keep in mind as we talk about if Lou, this assassin that is reincarnated in another world, is actually a demon in shining armor. Because from 2 different angles, we see that he's not to be trusted. And in several points throughout the series, additional segments, we will have these inner dialogues from him where he's trying to do things in order to gain trust. He's doing things to gain trust of the people of his area. He's doing things in order to gain the trust of his pupils, his servants, all for the sake of his journey, which is to eventually kill the hero. It at no point seems like he is working in a way where he's mutually wanting to assist people. It always seems like, in his perspective, everything is for his ultimate gain. It never at any point gives an idea that he's doing anything because he's being chivalrous or he's trying to be a hero. It's all to his goal. It's all to his purpose. He's a very calculative person that will always do things all for his job. It's something that has been carried over from his life previously as an assassin, that everything is to a goal. And this gets me to the subject at matter, as again, is Lou a demon in shining armor? And I think he is. And I think this is for a purpose. It was very interesting as the story began. Again, you get this whole perspective in the first episode of his old life, and then it jumps into his new life. And while it always seems to have this inner dialogue about him working for a purpose, it never seemed like he used people. And so it never seemed like he was, in some people's eyes, kind of a bad person. And that's the cool thing that I like about the series. As it gets into Dia coming in and teaching him magic, it never seemed like he was cold towards her. Yes, he was allowing her to teach him magic because obviously that's why she was there. But it never seemed like he was malicious about it. It never seemed like he was calculative to manipulate her in order to control her. Even though towards the later part, he does give her a gift to gain a bond to her, it never seemed like inner dialogue-wise that he was being calculative and manipulative. It wasn't until our experience with him bringing in Tart as a servant and him mentioning the idea of brainwashing her that we get this idea of, wait, this guy's kind of mean. Like, this kind of seems wrong in a way. And I do love that. Do not get me wrong. The reason why I'm talking about this right now is because I love this aspect of the story. I love that the writer is taking a character who is technically was an old man, who was set in his ways. He was very cold and very calculative, and he's coming into a new world where he's now a child again, and he's having to gain allies for a purpose. And despite the fact that, as we see with Tart, he saves her life. He seems like he's doing a good thing. From her perspective, he's doing a good thing. He saved her. He fed her. He clothed her. He gave her a place to stay. He's protecting her. He's training her to get stronger. Then in this recent episode, what does he do? He goes to this place that essentially is human trafficking, meets this girl named Maha, and what does he do? He comes in like a prince. He comes in like Prince Charming, this beautiful man. She's at her lowest low. She's terrified. She knows that she's going to be, basically her body's going to get used by many men the next day probably. And yet here he is. The knight in shining armor walks up and says, "You should smile. It looks better on you. I'm going to buy one of you. Come, I will take care of you. You are one of my family now." But it's so cool that us from outside looking in, not from Maha's perspective, not from Tart's perspective, us as the viewer or the reader, if you're the source material person, we get a perspective of, I guess that's good. It brings that question. That's the question that I love, is, I guess he saved her. I guess she's in a better place. But are they? Are these girls in a better place? And that's the cool question that comes up. It's the lesser of two evils aspects that it creates. Because yes, Tart was starving, but she might have found another place to stay. She might have found an old couple that would have taken care of her and fed her and gave her some crops to grow. Maha might have been sold off to a noble that would have taken care of her. We never know. What we know is now they're safe under the protection of Lu. But is that better? It does seem like it. Tart is obviously safe. She's clothed. She's warm. She's in a safe place. She's fed. She's in a much better place than what she seemed at that time. And yes, Maha isn't going to go off to get her body taken advantage of by the next person. But the conundrum comes up that where they're at now is in a place of deception. And is that technically a good thing? Technically, Lu can end up using them to kill people. Lu can use them to put them in danger. In this recent episode, when he's saving Maha, what's happening at the same time? Tart is putting herself in a situation with a man. What if something happened to Tart? We don't know, because Tart overcomes it and flees, but she's in that situation because Lu put her in that situation. So it brings up a conundrum of, despite them being brought in, thinking they're now safe and they have a place to stay, they're all technically being used by Lu. So is that any different than what they were in a position with before? Again, I'm not saying human trafficking is good. I'm not saying that starvation's good. The conundrum and the cool question that comes up is, despite us having this romantic viewpoint of these girls being brought in and saved by this guy, are they technically saved? Are they technically free? Or are they just being used and they think that they're in good places? I really do wonder if the writer, because it's obviously this is something the writer is really getting into. And again, this is something that's really cool about the story that I'm probably overthinking. But despite that, the writer is doing this. And the writer is very obvious about this. But I'm curious if the writer is willing to eventually get to that point where the characters question it. Now that said, I'm sure Tart is not dumb. I'm sure Tart knows this. At some point when Lu is taking Tart somewhere to the village and they check out the crops and people are excited about him helping them out, he talks about the fact that he's trying to gain favor of the people. And what does Tart say? are you being nice to me also so that you gain my favor? And he says, yes, because I need you. He's very obvious about it, and she is pointing it out. But will the concepts of him initially brainwashing her ever come up? Will the concept of Maha realizing that Lu needs her for something, not necessarily that he came there to rescue her like a knight in shining armor, ever come up? I'm very curious if that will ever be a thing in the story, because like I said, I think the writer set this stuff up. The writer's very obvious about using people, but will it be a story beat? Will it at some point blow up in his face or somebody realize something? Sadly, the typical way that a story like this ends up is at some point Lu goes, I'm sorry, I've been using you guys all along, run or flee or whatever, you can live your own life, this is a dangerous situation or something, and all the girls say, yeah, we know you were using us anyways, but we still love you, so we're going to protect you. It's probably going to go that route, but you never know. And that's what's so great, is because that desire of, will it do something different? Because obviously so far, it's done something different. There's very few anime out there, especially isekai, that opens up with a main protagonist using people in a deceptive way that puts them in a better spot so it doesn't feel dirty, but you still acknowledge the fact that he's technically using them. But that's my thoughts on the topic. I'm really interested to hear what you guys think. Are you guys on the same page as me? Do you guys find this stuff interesting? Definitely let me know in the comments down below. As I said before, this is technically one of the reasons why I do what I do. It's something I really find a lot of fun in watching anime, is finding what the writer's thinking and really diving into their head and figuring out what their thought process is on things. And that's definitely something that we do here at Taku Spirit. I hope that you guys will consider supporting us. We have the links in the description below, Patreon and tips link. Definitely appreciate everybody that does. And I hope you all enjoyed, and y'all take care.